So we've taken a look at higher order functions in the last video, and we made this function here called makeFilter. And so that took just a regular property value, and then it returned a function. And so it's higher order because it's actually returning another function. The other way we can build a higher order function is to actually pass in our own function to be run. And this is most often called a callback. So if you've heard callback before, we're going to talk about what that is and how that works. And we're going to do that by changing our filter beers function. We said before that we're running into this problem where property and value, what these are, may have to change because we want to be flexible. Like if you want to check two different properties, or if you just want to check the existence of different values on one property or against multiple. So there are all kinds of mix-ups and mashups that you could do with filtering. And you want to be able to be flexible to do that and not have really long comparison functions where you say, all right, if properties in an array do this, and if values in an array do it just gets really out of hand. And so we're going to actually implement a callback where you can define your comparison logic yourself, and then the filtering just does the filtering against your comparison. So instead of property and value, we're actually just going to take a callback. Now, there's nothing special or magical about a callback. I want to stress that. It is literally just a function that we are going to run on your behalf when you run filter beers. So when you pass a callback to something, you're just saying, here's a function that I want you to run later. Okay, so we accept that callback here. We still make our filtered beers array. We still loop over the beers. But instead of doing this if statement where we do our compare values, we're actually going to just run the callback. And we'll just run it with the current beer. And so everything else stays the same. We're just offloading the comparison logic to you so that you can run it yourself. Now this is going to break our makeFilter function, so we're going to have to do a little bit of a fix there. Now, instead of passing the property and the value, we'll pass a function. We know that when our callback gets run, it's going to be given a beer. So we can say beer here. And in here we'll return, and we're going to do this simple comparison here. Right? So beer property, we want to know if that is equal to the value. And so we're still using our cached scope variables using the higher order functions from the last video, but now we're actually going to have access to a beer, so we're going to pass this callback to our filter. And that will run, and that will do everything compare values was doing on the simplest path here. We'll still have to account for this path later, and I'll show you how we'll do that in a minute. So just for now, let's comment out compare values because we're not using it anymore, so we'll just prove that. And then all these things can stay the same. I'm going to save this, and let's go look at our website. Okay, so refresh here. We've got all of our beers. The domestic filter still works, imports, stouts, lagers, but ales is going to break because we lost the reference to our check to see if that type is an array. And so when that goes into that filter function, it just fails. So how do we fix this? Instead of putting all of that comparison logic in one function and trying to account for every possible scenario in that one comparison function, instead now we can just say, okay, for this filter by type, instead of using our saved function, filter by type only filters by one type. We're going to just use our filter beers function directly here. Now remember, this takes a callback. So we'll set our function here, which gets a reference to a beer. And now we just want to return if, oops, sorry, we don't need the if, just return, does beer.type equal ale, or beer.type equals IPA. So now, remember, this is looking more like it used to look, and so we're kind of going back and forth. But the point here is, in the simplest case where we're repeating things, it's the same exact thing. I just want to compare a locale to a value, a locale to a value. Now, in those cases, I can just make a simple filter, create that as its own function, and run it multiple times. It's nice, it's descriptive, it's declarative. Same with these types where I'm just comparing against one type. Same idea. But when I have a special case, I don't have to destroy everything. I have a flexible system. So I just call my filter beers function directly. I pass in the callback to do the comparison, which is a special case of comparison. And in here, I could do anything. I could say, do I want to know if the beer.name starts with something or the beer.type? And you can do an, right? We're not locked down to only or comparisons or only one property. We can do any comparison that's on that beer object that we want. And so we're really, really flexible. So we save that and go back, refresh, we have all. Domestic and import still works, but now ales also filters the way we want it to. So this is now cleaned up, it's declarative, it's descriptive, it's functional, and it also gives us a nice flexibility to do any kind of comparison we want. And so in the next video, we're going to go back to something I mentioned a while ago, and we'll talk about what a pure function is and whether a function should have side effects.